Once there was a young couple who decided to take a vacation and book an Airbnb in a remote, secluded area. The pictures on the listing looked lovely, and the host had great reviews, so they decided to book it for a week. Upon arrival, they found the house to be even more beautiful than the pictures had shown. They settled in and decided to explore the area. However, they quickly realized that there was something off about the place. The air was thick and musty, and there were strange noises coming from the walls. They shrugged it off and attributed it to the house being old and isolated. But as the days went by, the strange occurrences became more frequent and intense. They would wake up in the middle of the night to find objects moved or missing, and they could hear faint whispering coming from the walls. One night, they decided to investigate and found a hidden room in the basement. Inside, they found a collection of eerie dolls and a diary. The diary belonged to the previous owner of the house, who had been driven to madness by the spirits that haunted the place. The couple tried to leave, but found that all the doors and windows were locked from the outside. They were trapped, and the spirits became more aggressive and violent. The couple was never seen or heard from again. The host of the Airbnb was never found, and the house remains empty to this day. Some say that the spirits still linger and that the house is cursed. The couple's family and friends became worried when they didn't hear from them and reported them missing. The police launched an investigation and found the hidden room in the basement, along with the eerie dolls and the diary, but there was no sign of the couple. They searched the surrounding woods and fields but found nothing. They also contacted the host of the Airbnb, but the phone number and email address provided were fake. It was as if the couple had vanished into thin air. The police were unable to find any leads, and the case eventually went cold. The house was left abandoned and became known as the Haunted Airbnb. Rumors started spreading about the house being cursed and that the couple had been taken by the spirits that haunted the place. Some locals even claimed to have seen ghostly figures wandering around the house at night. Years went by, and the house remained unoccupied. But one day, a new family moved in. They had no idea about the history of the house and the tragic events that had occurred there. But it wasn't long before they too began experiencing strange occurrences, and they quickly realized that they were not alone in the house, and they moved out quickly. The story of the haunted Airbnb spread quickly, and it became a popular destination for thrill seekers and ghost hunters. But for those who have had the misfortune of staying there, the experience was nothing short of a nightmare. Years went by, and the story of the haunted Airbnb was almost forgotten. But a group of independent detectives who were interested in unsolved mysteries decided to take up the case. They interviewed locals and did extensive research on the history of the house and the surrounding area. They discovered that the house had been built over 100 years ago by a wealthy family. The family had a daughter who was born with a severe disability, and they kept her locked away in the basement. They were ashamed of her and didn't want anyone to know about her existence. The daughter was kept in the basement for her entire life, and she was never allowed to leave. She was treated like a prisoner and was subjected to abuse and neglect. She died alone in the basement at a young age, and her body was buried in the woods behind the house. The detectives also discovered that the spirits of the girl and her family members still haunted the house, and they were angry and vengeful. They had been responsible for the strange occurrences that had happened over the years, and they had been responsible for the disappearance of the young couple. The detectives shared their findings with the authorities, and the house was finally condemned. It was demolished, and the spirits were said to have been laid to rest. But some say that they can still hear the faint whispering coming from the woods on quiet nights, and that the spirits of the girl and her family still roam the area. The story of the haunted Airbnb serves as a reminder of the atrocities that can be committed behind closed doors, and the devastating consequences that can result from them. Emily decided to book an Airbnb for a solo trip to a remote town. She found a beautiful Victorian house that seemed perfect for her needs. However, upon arrival, she quickly realized that something was off. The house was filled with strange antiques and odd trinkets that gave Emily an eerie feeling. She shrugged it off and decided to explore the town. But as the night went on, strange occurrences began to happen in the house. Doors would slam shut on their own and strange noises would come from the walls. Emily tried to ignore it and went to bed, but she was awakened in the middle of the night by the sound of someone walking up the stairs. She assumed it was her host, but when she went to check, she found that the house was empty. As the days went by, the strange occurrences continued and Emily found herself becoming more and more paranoid. She began to suspect that the house was haunted and that her host had known all along. But she didn't give up. She found a way to contact her family and friends, and they helped her to get out of the house. Emily returned home safe and sound, but she was shaken by her experience. She reported the strange events to her host and the authorities. The investigation revealed that the house was not haunted, but it had some technical issues that caused the strange noises and movements. After Emily returned home, she shared her story on social media and was surprised when people began to write to her, sharing their own experiences at the same Victorian house. They all had similar stories of strange occurrences and eerie feelings. Emily was shocked that she wasn't the only one to have experienced this. Determined to get to the bottom of it, Emily teamed up with these people and they decided to conduct their own investigation. They gathered evidence and interviewed former guests, and soon discovered that all the strange sounds and movements were the work of the owner of the house, but the purpose of his actions remained unknown. Emily and her team contacted the authorities and provided them with their findings. The owner of the house was questioned, but he refused to give any explanation for his actions. He claimed that he was just trying to create an eerie atmosphere for his guests, but it didn't go as planned. The police couldn't find any criminal intent, but the owner was forced to shut down his Airbnb listing and refund all the guests. Emily was relieved that she and her team were able to shed light on the strange happenings at the house, and that they were able to prevent others from experiencing the same fear and paranoia that she had felt. The owner of the house, a middle-aged man named Jack, had always been hesitant about renting out his home on Airbnb, but with bills piling up and no other source of income, he decided to give it a try. He spent a week getting his home in order, making sure everything was clean and presentable for potential guests. The first group to book a stay were a group of young adults in their 20s, who were looking for a place to stay while they visited a nearby town for a music festival. They seemed friendly and trustworthy, and Jack was happy to accommodate them. The group arrived on a Friday evening, and everything seemed to be going well. Jack gave them a tour of the house and showed them where everything was. They thanked him and settled in for the night. But as the weekend went on, strange things began to happen. Jack would hear strange noises coming from the guest room at night, and when he went to check on it, he would find the door locked and no one inside. He also noticed that the curtains in the guest room were always closed, even during the day, and no one ever seemed to come out. On the second night, Jack woke up to find that all the lights in the house had been turned off, and he could hear whispering coming from the guest room. He tried to open the door, but it was locked from the inside. Frightened and confused, he went back to bed and tried to ignore the strange noises. The next morning, the group checked out, leaving Jack with a strange feeling of unease. He decided to go into the guest room to see if everything was okay, but what he found was beyond horrifying. The room was covered in blood and other strange markings, and the walls were adorned with strange symbols and ritualistic drawings. There were also strange tools scattered about the room, which Jack couldn't identify. He felt as if he was in a nightmare and could not believe what he saw. The group of young people had been involved in some kind of dark and sinister rituals, and Jack felt violated and violated. He could not understand how he had not noticed the strange behavior of his guests, and he felt guilty for letting them into his home. From that day on, Jack swore never to rent out his home on Airbnb again. He could not shake the feeling of dread that had taken hold of him, and he knew that he would never be able to forget the terrible things that had happened in his home. Jack immediately contacted the police after discovering the horrors in his guest room. The officers were shocked and horrified by what they saw, and they immediately began an investigation to find the young people who had rented the house. However, despite an extensive search, the police were unable to find any trace of the group. They checked their IDs, ran background checks, and even reached out to the music festival organizers for information, but nothing turned up. It was as if the group of young people had never existed at all. The police concluded that the group had used fake identities and that they had deliberately disappeared without a trace. They were unable to determine their whereabouts, and the case remains unsolved to this day. Jack was left feeling even more disturbed by the events of that weekend. He couldn't understand how these people had been able to slip through the cracks and disappear without a trace. He felt like he had been duped and taken advantage of, and he couldn't shake the feeling that he was still being watched. As the weeks went by, Jack began to notice strange occurrences happening around the house. Objects would move on their own, and he would hear strange noises coming from the guest room. He began to fear for his safety and decided to leave the house and never come back. The house now stands empty and abandoned, a reminder of the terrifying events that took place there. Jack still thinks about the group of young people who had rented his home and wonders if they will ever be found. He can only hope that they are caught before they can harm anyone else. A year and a half later, Jack saw a news report that caught his attention. 3 people had gone missing in the past few months, and they were all united by the fact that they had rented houses on Airbnb. The similarities to his own experience were too striking for him to ignore. He immediately contacted the police, but they were unable to connect the disappearances to his own case. The police searched the houses that the missing people had rented on Airbnb, but they found nothing out of the ordinary. However, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that there was a connection between his own experience and the disappearances of these 3 people. He decided reaching out to other homeowners who had rented their homes on Airbnb and asking if they had experienced anything strange or unusual. To his surprise, he found several people who had similar experiences to his own. Jack became convinced that there was a sinister force at work, targeting people who rented their homes on Airbnb. He knew that he had to do something to stop this from happening to anyone else. He contacted the media and shared his story, warning other homeowners to be cautious when renting their homes on Airbnb. He also contacted the company, urging them to improve their background check process and to take the safety of their guests more seriously. Despite his efforts, the disappearances continued, and the case remains unsolved to this day. Jack can only hope that one day the truth will be uncovered and that the people responsible for these terrible crimes will be brought to justice. The case of the missing people who all rented houses on Airbnb remains a mystery, and it serves as a chilling reminder of the dangers of the unknown. It also puts into question the safety and reliability of short-term rentals and highlights the importance of proper background checks and safety measures for both hosts and guests.